Welcome to Talk Peppy to Me. I'm your host, Jess. I am currently completing my functional medicine certified health coach training, and I share what I'm learning in real time. I want to translate complex science into conversations that actually make sense. And this podcast is primarily for women navigating hormonal and metabolic changes through different seasons of life, especially pre, peri, mid, and post-menopause. If your body feels like it changed the rules without asking, or maybe it never followed the rules to begin with, or if your energy, weight, skin, mood, or metabolism don't respond the way they used to, or if you've ever been told, oh, this is just part of aging, you are in the right place. While women's health is at the center of these conversations, this space is open to anyone who wants to better understand longevity, metabolic health, and how the body actually changes over time. A lot of people don't come here because something is wrong. They come here because something just feels different. Here's what I want you to know right away. This podcast is not about fixing you. It's not about chasing trends. It's not about extreme protocols. And it's definitely not about shaming your body for changing. It's about understanding what's happening beneath the surface, understanding why what used to work might not anymore, and understanding how to support your body with clarity instead of fear. Most of us were never taught how hormones shift over time. There was no roadmap for this phase of life. On this podcast, we talk about peptides, GLP-1s, skin health, metabolic health, and longevity through a functional medicine lens, without fear-mongering, without shame, and without biohacking extremes. One of the biggest shifts in my functional medicine training has been learning to ask better questions instead of jumping straight to solutions. Just to be very clear, I am not a medical provider, and nothing on this podcast is medical advice. This is educational content meant to support informed conversations with your healthcare provider. You may hear me mention tools or resources or partners I personally use or trust. Some may be affiliate relationships, which means I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you, and I'll always disclose that clearly. So today, we're starting with the most important question of all. What does longevity actually mean in 2026? Especially for bodies that don't respond the way they used to.
Living out loud, learning in real time, sharing the truth I needed to find. If you're ready to turn the story into something steady, let's talk peppy.
All right, let's talk about it, because longevity has become wildly overcomplicated. Somewhere along the way, longevity turned into anti-aging turned into fear, and fear turned into 1,000 protocols telling people their body is a problem to solve. And that framing matters, because when we talk about health through fear, we stop listening. Longevity is not about living forever. It's not about reversing time, and it's definitely not about punishing your body into submission. Longevity is about living better for longer. It's about energy, not just getting through the day, but having something left at the end of it. It's about mobility, trusting your body to support you as you move through life. And it's about mental clarity, emotional steadiness, metabolic stability, and resilience, especially as hormones shift. For many women, the shift doesn't come with a big announcement. It's subtle, it's gradual, it's confusing. You don't wake up one day and think, oh, I've entered a new phase of life. You wake up and think, why does this feel harder than it used to? I mean, you're doing the same workouts, you're eating the same way, but your body is just responding differently. Your labs say normal. The doctors say, oh, just move a little bit more. You don't feel normal. And because no one taught us to expect this, many people assume they're doing something wrong. They assume they need more discipline, more restriction, more control. But most of the time, what's really needed is more context. For a long time, longevity was framed around appearance. How young you look, how lean you stay, how well you hold it all together. But in 2026, that conversation is shifting, and it needs to. Longevity is moving away from how do I look and toward how do I function? Because function tells the truth. You can look fine and still feel exhausted. You can be thin and still be metabolically stressed. This matters deeply in pre, peri, and post-menopause because hormones change how your body processes stress, fuel, sleep, and recovery. The rules shift, and pretending they haven't is where frustration lives. One of the hardest parts of this season is realizing that what used to work doesn't anymore. Not because you failed, not because you got lazy, but because your physiology changed. Longevity isn't about forcing your body to obey old rules. It's about learning the new ones. You are allowed to update how you support yourself. And you don't have to pay attention to how everyone else is doing it. I've said it so many times. You are not one size fits all. And your health journey, it's not going to be one size fits all either. Needing different support doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. Change isn't a threat. Change is information. Your body is communicating and you just gotta listen. Real longevity requires curiosity, patience, and a willingness to zoom out. It asks different questions. What's driving this? What's being stressed? What needs support now? Not 10 years ago, now. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop fighting your body and the opinions of others and start understanding your specific needs. That's what this podcast is about. And when we approach longevity with context instead of control, a functional lens becomes incredibly helpful. This is where I want to introduce something that might be new for a lot of people, and that's the difference between traditional medicine and functional medicine. Because when people hear functional, they sometimes assume it means alternative, extreme, or anti-medicine, and that's not what it means at all. Traditional medicine is incredibly important. It saves lives, it treats acute illness, it's essential for diagnosis, emergencies, and disease management. If you break your arm, you want traditional medicine. If you have an infection, you want traditional medicine. If something is urgent or life-threatening, traditional medicine is exactly where you should be. Functional medicine doesn't replace that. It complements it. Traditional medicine is designed to ask one very important question: what disease is present and how do we treat it? It's symptom-focused, diagnosis-driven, and incredibly effective at intervention. But where many people, especially women, start to feel frustrated is in the space before a diagnosis, when labs are technically normal, but you don't feel normal. When symptoms are real, but they don't fit neatly into a box. When you're told, well, everything looks fine, maybe you just need to move your body a little bit more, or, I don't know, get some extra sleep. Yet your energy, weight, sleep, skin, or mood tell a different story. That gap is where functional medicine comes in. Functional medicine asks a different set of questions. Instead of asking only, what disease do you have? It asks, why is this happening? It looks at the body as an interconnected system, not isolated parts. Blood sugar affects hormones. Hormones affect sleep. Sleep affects stress. Stress affects digestion. Digestion affects inflammation. And inflammation affects everything. Nothing is happening in isolation, even when symptoms show up that way. This systems-based view becomes especially important in pre, peri, and post-menopause because during these transitions, the body is adapting. Hormones fluctuate, stress tolerances change, recovery looks different. What used to work doesn't work anymore. And traditional medicine often isn't designed to slow down and explore those shifts unless there's clear pathology. Functional medicine is interested in the patterns before things break down. It's less about labeling, more about listening. This is important. Functional medicine is not a protocol. It's not a supplement list. It's not a peptide stack. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a way of thinking. It's a framework for understanding how your body is adapting or struggling to adapt to stressors over time. That's why two people with the same symptom can need completely different support. This is also where I want to be very clear about my role. Again, I am not a medical provider. I don't diagnose, I don't prescribe, and I don't replace medical care. As a functional medicine certified health coach in training, my role is to help translate this lens, to help people understand how systems connect, to ask better questions, and to support sustainable behavior change. Coaching lives in the space of education, awareness, and integration, not treatment. That distinction matters, and it protects you. One of the biggest shifts for me has been realizing how often bodies are compensating, not failing. The symptoms aren't always the problem. They're often the signal. For a lot of people, this lens feels relieving because it reframes the story. Instead of, what's wrong with me? The question becomes, what is my body responding to? And that shift alone can change how you care for yourself. One misconception I want to clear up is that functional medicine is slow or passive or do nothing. It's actually very active, just not reactive. It prioritizes foundations, sleep, nourishment, stress regulation, movement, metabolic stability, because without those, no intervention works the way it's supposed to. You can't out-supplement poor sleep. You can't out-biohack chronic stress. And you can't optimize a body that doesn't feel safe. This is why functional medicine pairs so naturally with longevity. Longevity isn't about quick fixes. It's about resilience and adaptability and supporting the body over time. When you understand how your systems interact, you stop chasing every new trend and start making more grounded decisions. That's the goal here. So when I talk about longevity or peptides or GLPs or skin health on this podcast, it's always through this lens. Not as magic solutions, but as tools that may or may not make sense depending on the bigger picture. And that brings us to the part people don't always want to hear, the reality check. Contrary to popular belief, longevity is not flashy. It doesn't come with before and after photos that make you gasp. It doesn't usually feel dramatic, and it rarely looks like what's trending online. Longevity is built quietly. One of the biggest myths in health, especially in midlife, is that if things aren't working, you need to do more. More supplements, more protocols, more restriction, more optimization. But in reality, doing more often creates more stress, not more results. I see this pattern all the time. People stacking everything at once because they're afraid to miss the one thing that will fix them. Jumping from protocol to protocol without ever letting your body settle. The body doesn't respond well to constant change. It responds to consistency. Another reality we need to normalize is that real progress often feels slow, especially when hormones are shifting. When you're in pre, peri, mid, or post menopause, your body is recalibrating. Stress tolerance changes, recovery changes, feedback loops change, and because we're used to faster results earlier in life, this can feel frustrating or even discouraging. But slower doesn't mean worse. It often means more sustainable. Here's another reality check. No tool works without foundations. Not supplements, not peptides, not medications, not biohacks. Sleep matters. Stress regulation matters. Blood sugar stability matters. Nourishment matters. These things aren't sexy. They're not exciting. They don't make great headlines, but they're the difference between something helping and something backfiring. You cannot out-supplement poor sleep. You cannot out-biohack chronic stress, and you cannot optimize a body that feels constantly under threat. I feel like a broken record at this point. Another hard truth: comparison is one of the fastest ways to sabotage your health journey. What works for someone else, especially someone online, is missing critical context. You don't know how their stress is. You don't know what their sleep looks like, their history, their hormones, their support system. Longevity is deeply personal, and when we compare without context, we end up forcing our bodies into strategies that were never meant for us. You don't need to look like someone else's journey. Your timeline is allowed to be your own. Here's what real progress often looks like, and it doesn't get talked about enough. More stable energy, fewer crashes, better sleep consistency, improved resilience to stress, and it looks like fewer extremes, not more. It's like your body feels more predictable, not perfectly optimized. And that kind of progress builds trust between you and your body. This might be the most important thing that I say in this episode. Longevity is not a project. It's not something you fix and move on from. It's not a 30-day plan, and it's not a finish line. Longevity is a relationship with your body that evolves as your life evolves. And like any relationship, it works best when it's built on listening and patience and respect, not control. When you understand this, the pressure lifts. You stop chasing perfection and start building stability. And that is where the emotional side of this journey really matters. All right, scooching close. It's time for the pep talk of Talk Peppy. If you're listening to this and thinking, I should have started earlier, or I feel behind, or my body just doesn't work the way it used to, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not late. You are not broken, and your body is not betraying you. A lot of people quietly carry the fear that they missed their window, that if they didn't optimize their health earlier, or if they didn't know what they know now, it's somehow too late. But bodies don't work on deadlines. They work on information, safety, and support. And the moment you start paying attention, that's the moment your body has something new to work with. One of the hardest things about this season of life is that change gets interpreted as failure. Weight changes, energy shifts, sleep feels different, recovery takes longer, and instead of thinking, my body is changing, we think, my body is failing. But those are very different stories. Change is not failure. Change is information. Your body is responding to a different internal and external environment than it did 10 or 20 years ago. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it honest. You were never meant to power through hormonal change the same way you powered through earlier seasons of life. That expectation alone creates so much unnecessary suffering. This season asks for something different. more listening, more adjustment, more compassion, not more discipline, not more restriction, not more self-criticism. You are allowed to update how you take care of yourself. Needing different support now doesn't erase everything that you've done before. You didn't do it wrong. You're just in a different chapter. Another quiet grief people don't talk about is the fear of losing themselves in this process. The fear that if your body changes or your energy changes or your capacity changes, you're somehow less you. But you are not your productivity. You are not your metabolism. You are not how efficiently your body responds to stress. You are still you, with more information, more depth, and more awareness than you've ever had before. Longevity is a long game. Not because progress is slow, but because it's meant to support you over time. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't need to get it right. And you don't need to compare your journey to anyone else's. You just need to stay in relationship with your body. If nothing else from this episode sticks with you, let this one thing stay. You are allowed to take this at your own pace. You are allowed to ask better questions, and you are allowed to support your body without fear or shame. This season doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means something is changing, and change deserves care. And if you ever feel overwhelmed, unsure, or stuck, remember that these conversations don't have to happen alone. A lot of people think they need to figure everything out before they ask questions, before they talk to someone, before they stay curious, before they give themselves support. But health doesn't work that way. Clarity comes from conversation. Understanding grows when you're not doing it in isolation. So if this episode resonated with you even a little, there's nothing you need to do immediately. No checklist, no protocol, no pressure. Sometimes the most supportive next step is simply staying in the conversation. If you're finding yourself curious, or if this episode brought up questions instead of answers, I'd love for you to stay with me. In the next episode, we're talking about peptides versus supplements, not from a hype perspective, but from a context perspective. We'll talk about how to think through tools instead of chasing trends, and how to ask better questions before adding anything new. That episode will be especially helpful if you've ever thought, do I actually need this? Or why does everyone seem to be taking something different? If listening brings up a desire to explore your health more deeply, your best next step is always a conversation with your healthcare provider. Bring questions, bring curiosity, bring context. This podcast is meant to support those conversations, not replace them. You may also hear me reference tools, resources, or telehealth platforms that I personally use or trust. Some of those may be affiliate partnerships, which means I may earn a commission if you choose to explore them at no additional cost to you. They will typically be linked in the caption or description of this podcast. I share those transparently and thoughtfully, and only when they align with the bigger picture we're talking about. You'll never hear me push something just to push it. And if you're someone who tends to think, I wish I could just talk through this with someone, that's exactly why this space exists. You're not supposed to have all the answers. You're not behind, and you're not navigating this alone. Send me a message. Let's continue this conversation outside of the podcast. Thank you for trusting me with your time, your curiosity, and this season of your health. And remember, it always helps to talk a little peppy.